Picture this. In the heart of a bustling city where everyone is running, competing, and acting, one man walks slowly. He had no phone in his hand, no Bluetooth call, and no tension on his face. He's dressed plainly. He doesn't appear rich. He does not appear poor. He simply appears liberated. While the people around him are in a frenzy, checking stocks, hurrying to meetings, flaunting clothing, chasing likes, he walks as if he isn't a part of the race, because he is not. He is not hustling. He isn't selling himself. He isn't striving to get ahead, and that's exactly what makes him dangerous. He is not plugged into the same machine as the rest of us. He does not measure his worth by money, popularity, or job titles. He doesn't care if you consider him successful. He isn't interested in climbing a ladder that leads nowhere. He's living by his own rhythm and values, which, in a culture designed to keep you dependent, is an act of rebellion. You see, in an environment where everyone is chasing money as if it were oxygen, the man who does not flee becomes a threat. Not because he causes harm to anyone, but because his existence raises a terrifying question. What if freedom isn't found in what you can buy, but in what you no longer need? What if success isn't accumulation, but liberation? What if the entire game is rigged, and he simply walked off the board? That question is beyond the capabilities of the system, because that man, the one who does not pursue money, isn't playing. He has outgrown the game, and nothing frightens the system more than someone who does not want what it is offering. If you want to truly understand why the man who doesn't chase money is society's greatest threat, make sure you watch this video till the end. Let me tell you something that few people dare to admit. This society is constructed not only on money, but also on your need for money. Regarding your worry of not having it, your fear of poverty, of being left behind, of being judged. Every major industry you contact with, education, advertising, social media, and technology, is more than just selling a product. It promotes the idea that your life is only valuable if it is profitable. You must hustle or you are lazy. You must want more or you are unambitious. Burnout is a badge of glory, whereas comfort is a sign of weakness. Consider this. From a young age, you are taught that success means earnings, that your time is only worthwhile if someone else pays for it, the rest is guilt. And play is childish, unless it is commercialized. Even schools have stopped teaching curiosity. They promote conformity. They teach you to pursue credentials in order to earn a living. Then they turn you over to corporations that offer fulfillment but bring debt, deadlines, and reliance. Here's the bleak truth. If you don't want money, you aren't a good consumer. If you're satisfied, you're terrible for business. If you're self-sufficient, you're a glitch in the system. And society despises malfunctions, so they characterize you as lazy, irresponsible, unrealistic, broke. But those words are not true. They are in control. They're weapons that will keep you running in circles. Never stop looking for the next thing, constantly feeling inadequate. But what if the man who walks away from that chase isn't lost, but found? What if the man who lives simply isn't failing, but winning? What if rejecting the money obsession isn't weakness, but wisdom? Erich Fromm once said, "If I am what I have, and if what I have is lost, then who am I?" The system does not want you to ask that inquiry, but you must. Because until you do, you are not living, you are simply earning. And there is a world of difference between the two. Erich Fromm also said, "Real wealth is not having more, but needing less." The truly rich man is not the one who has much, but the one who is no longer controlled by the fear of not having. Let that sink in. Most people do not chase money because they love it. They chase it because they are afraid of what will happen without it. Fear of being judged, fear of failing, fear of being irrelevant. But what if the man who isn't concerned about being broke, because he understands who he is, whether or without a bank account, is actually the richest man in the room? Henry David Thoreau realized this long before the world became a 24/7 commerce. He stepped away from the noise, from the rat race, from the expectations. He built a cottage in the woods near Walden Pond not to escape life, but to explore it. People referred to him as poor, but he wasn't. He had enough food, housing, and leisure to ponder, write, walk, and simply be. What he truly possessed was something most millionaires can't buy: freedom. Thoreau wasn't going to defy the system, he simply went outside of it. And from there, he could see clearly, the more you want, the more you can be owned. But the less you need, the less you can be bought. Several decades later, Fromm confirmed this point. He cautioned that modern man had become a slave, not to shackles, but to consumerism. We no longer ask who we are, but rather what we have. We don't seek meaning, we seek upgrades. Our identity is determined by what we have in our pocketbook rather than what we have in our soul. But here's a daring idea. If you no longer fear poverty, you cannot be bribed. You can no longer be enticed by bright objects or scared by the danger of lack. The person who does not fear poverty will be able to choose freedom. Let's go deeper. What really goes on inside the mind of someone who isn't controlled by money? Who doesn't wake up every day worrying about how to climb the next financial rung or prove their worth with a paycheck? Here's what I have learned. They don't live to devour, they live to feel, to be present, to create, to relish. Their joy is not derived from purchases, but from moments, from conversations, from silence, from a journey through nature, slowly reading a book and carefully preparing a meal. These are the riches that cannot be taxed or sold. They don't need to wear their value. They are their value. They do not seek prestige symbols to prove their worth. They do not need to. They understand who they are, and that's enough. They don't worry about being perceived as less than because they've stopped playing that game entirely. Theirs is not a life of ownership. It is a life of existence. So here's the thing. They've recaptured something we all had as youngsters but lost along the way, the freedom to wander, play, and be curious without cost. They've reclaimed the right to enjoy without possessing, to belong without purchasing, to exist without performing. They find delight not in their possessions but in their experiences. That gives them a deep, calm, untouchable power. When your happiness is not dependent on the market, algorithm, or income, you become a person who cannot be bought, controlled, or broken, which is a source of fear for the modern world. So how do you live this way? How do you break free from the hold of money, prestige, and never-ending desire? Thoreau gave us a blueprint nearly 2 centuries ago, and it's never been more relevant. He believed that true freedom came from needing less rather than gaining more. Every object you possess, every service you rely on, and every luxury you value is tied to a string. The more strings you have, the more twisted you get. Thoreau did not only talk about it, he lived it. He moved to Walden not to escape the world, but to observe it from afar. He individually constructed his own tiny cabin. He grew his own food. We lived on the basic essentials. In doing so, he realized a vital truth. When you reduce your needs, you get more freedom. It's not poverty, it's power. It's not deprivation, it's clarity. When you stop focusing on material possessions, you gain important time, energy, and mental clarity. You're no longer bound to employment you despise in order to maintain a lifestyle you don't even enjoy. You can say no without fear. You can walk away without regrets. You've discovered that focusing on what's truly important is sufficient. Thoreau once wrote, "A man is rich in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone." Allow that line to live inside you, because the less possessions you need, the fewer ways the world can dominate you. Minimalism is not about owning nothing, but about no longer being owned. When you just have what you need, everything you own becomes more valuable. What about the space you create? That's where your true life starts. Let's dig deeper now. Thoreau taught us how to live with less, but Erich Fromm demonstrated why it matters. He warned that modern society has fooled us into believing that having is the same as being. Your car defines your position. Your pay determines your intelligence. Your goods determine your worth. We've created a society in which you don't exist unless someone else notices, appreciates, and affirms it. But Fromm flipped the script. He stated, "True fulfillment does not come from having, it comes from being. Being present, being alive, being free. Being connected to oneself in a way that cannot be sold, liked, or monetized." He called it the mode of being versus the mode of having, and the distinction is critical. When you live in the mode of having, you always crave more. You are always terrified of losing what you have. You become possessive, apprehensive, and insecure. Your self-esteem fluctuates in response to your income, looks, and success level. But in the manner of being, you are grounded. You are sufficient as you are. You do not need to prove anything. You can simply exist, deeply, meaningfully, and peacefully. The radical thing is that people who live this way are resistant to modern manipulation tools. Ads do not work on them. Status symbols do not impress them. Peer pressure does not sway them. Because their idea of value is not external but rather inside. To feel strong, they do not need to own the entire planet. They need to understand themselves. That is where their true riches lies. So the question is this: are you living to accumulate or to become? Are you evaluating your life by what you have, or by who you are after all the noise is removed? Fromm's fact is straightforward, but it shakes the basis of consumer culture. The person who prefers being to having is no longer a slave, and in today's environment, that makes them extremely deadly. Let us be clear, money is not the enemy. It's a tool, nothing more. It builds, supports, feeds, and shelters. However, somewhere along the way, we stopped using money and began serving it. We made it the master, the measure, and the meaning. And that's where the risk starts. Because when your freedom is dependent on your finances, it becomes a transaction rather than freedom. Consider how many people sacrifice their time, energy, health, and even their ideals for an earnings. They don't want to, but they have to. They preserve their jobs by being silent during meetings. They continue to work in dangerous jobs because they want to feel safe. They say yes when their soul screams no, only to keep the money coming in. That is not wealth, that is quiet desperation. The paradox is that when you cease fearing financial loss, you gain the freedom to speak the truth, free to live with honesty. You are free to choose what is right, not what is convenient. When you stop worrying about dwindling bank balances, you start asking greater concerns, such as, does this align with who I really am? Am I building a life I respect or just paying to survive? The establishment wants you to think that money equals freedom, but it isn't. Detachment from money means liberation. Freedom is achieved via mastery of your passions. The ability to walk away, say no, and live on your own terms, that is true riches. It is not about denying money. It is about refusing to be controlled by it. So, what is it like to live without chasing money? What makes a person truly independent, grounded, and resistant to manipulation? After thinking on the wisdom of intellectuals such as Thoreau and Fromm, as well as witnessing how modern society tries to keep us striving, I've come to believe in 4 fundamental truths. 4 inner strengths that set people free, not only financially, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. 1. Freedom from artificial desire. We live in a culture that makes you feel like you're always missing something. Every advertisement, social media trend, and status symbol reminds you that you're not enough unless you buy more. However, the individual who stops and challenges that voice is already half free. They don't follow trends. They do not compare themselves to others. They pose straightforward but impactful questions like, do I really want this? Or have I just been told I should? That level of awareness disrupts the loop of perpetual consumption. Value independence. Most individuals walk around with values they didn't choose. They believe what their parents believe, what their teachers taught, what society repeated, without questioning why. However, the person who creates their own code of success and happiness based on what is actually important to them becomes untouchable. When you no longer need approval to feel right and you know what you stand for, the pressure to comply becomes less powerful. 3. The ability to nourish yourself emotionally. In a society when many people rely on likes, attention, and continual distractions to feel good, the person who can sit alone with their thoughts, enjoy their own company, and feel at ease without external stimulation possesses a superpower. Their delight is not derived from material items. Rather, it stems from reflection, creativity, and being fully present in the moment. And that type of inner power cannot be purchased or borrowed. It needs to be built. 4. Social courage. The 4th is something most individuals would never dare to try: social courage. The fortitude to pursue your own path even when others do not understand, to say no to what is expected, let go of approval. To risk being labeled strange, lazy, or unrealistic because you have chosen to live with honesty rather than performance. That type of bravery rattles people. It makes people uncomfortable because it serves as a reminder of their own compromise. But it also inspires. People admire those who are brave enough to be authentic. There are 4 principles: freedom from false desires, independence of values, emotional self-reliance, social courage. They provide the framework for a life that cannot be purchased, owned, or controlled. And in a system built on selling you a version of happiness that is constantly just out of grasp, such freedom is revolutionary. Let's not sugarcoat it. Refusing to chase money will cost you. Not in the way most people fear, not in hunger or poverty, but rather in perception. People will misunderstand you. People will label you. They will brand you sluggish, unproductive, and even a failure. Not because you are, but because you challenge everything they have been taught to value. You'll notice it in the way people react when you claim you've chosen a simpler lifestyle, when you decline a promotion that does not resonate with your soul, when you turn down a high-paying job because it demands too much of your time, health, and peace. They won't receive it, and that's fine, because what you're gaining is something they can't see and probably won't believe. You gain time, not simply free hours, but time that feels like it belongs to you. You acquire space to think, breathe, and reconnect with what is important. You gain clarity, the kind that only comes when you're not distracted or chasing approval. Above all, you get freedom, which neither money nor position can provide. Freedom to live with integrity, freedom to create without pressure, freedom to speak the truth, move slowly, to wake up without feeling like you're already behind. That level of independence is uncommon, and because it is uncommon, it is misunderstood. People might wander away, some friendships will vanish. Even family members may be concerned that you have lost your ambition, but they don't realize you haven't given up on life. You've finally started living it, on your own terms. The paradox is that when you don't need money to prove your worth, it becomes self-evident. You carry it with you. It shows in the way you walk, speak, and no longer bend yourself to fit into areas you've outgrown. The reward is calm confidence, which does not require attention. That's the treasure at the end of the less traveled path. Now let's talk about why this choice, this refusal to play the game, makes people so uncomfortable. Why it threatens the very structure of modern life. Because leaving the money chase changes more than just your personal life. You interrupt the system. First, the economic system. Modern economies thrive on limitless consumerism. You are expected to continue buying, upgrading, and seeking. A person who is content and does not require the latest phone, fashion, or vacation is a problem. You do not feed the machine. You do not fuel the cycle. This renders you economically useless in the eyes of those who profit from your insecurity. Second, consider the political system. Most political narratives are based on fear. Fear of shortage, fear of the other, and fear of losing what you own. Someone who isn't afraid of losing money, prestige, or approval is considerably more difficult to manipulate. Promises and threats cannot entice you to remain silent. You think for yourself. You vote clearly. You defy emotional blackmail. And that level of independence frightens those who rely on mass control. Third, consider the psychological impact. Your peace becomes a mirror, and people despise what it reveals. Your contentment emphasizes their unrest. Your liberation reveals their chains. You are not condemning them, but they feel judged simply by your presence. So they push back. They call you the disorder. They try to draw you back in, because if your way of life is valid, theirs may not be. And that's a truth too heavy for most to hold. In the end, society doesn't fear the poor, it fears the independent. It fears the person who does not want what everyone else wants. The guy who does not have to prove anything. The one who walks through the world not looking to take but to be. And that type of individual is the most rare and dangerous of all. So, how does one become this type of person? Who doesn't chase money, isn't overwhelmed by anxiety, and lives life on their own terms? Fromm and Thoreau did not simply identify the problem, they also proposed a solution. And no, it doesn't require escaping to the woods or rejecting all comforts. It begins with something a lot more subtle, but far more powerful. You begin by simplifying, not just your home, but also your psyche. Begin to remove the noise, clutter, and compulsions. Look at your spending as a spiritual audit rather than a financial strategy. What are you buying that you do not need? What desires have you developed as a result of advertising rather than your own soul? Then go deeper. Define your non-negotiables. What ideals mean more to you than a paycheck? Perhaps it is honesty. Alternatively, spend time with your family or your health. Alternatively, consider your creativity. Whatever it is, name it. Write it down, make it sacrosanct. Because once you understand what cannot be purchased, you cease selling parts of yourself for comfort or acclaim. The next step is to invest where it counts. Not in stocks or brands, but in your being. Learn something that will encourage you. Read slowly. Think deeply. Make something with your hands. Spend time alone, not to avoid people, but to rediscover yourself. Knowing your identity is essential for living freely. Becoming isn't a side project, it is the primary mission, and gradually, purposefully, diminish your reliance on money. That does not imply becoming careless or irresponsible. It means becoming resourceful. Learn to require less. Learn to build your life around your priorities rather than your money. That shift, small at first, starts to change everything. You start to trust yourself more than the market. You start living with money, not for it. This is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice, a sluggish yet consistent rebellion, a decision to be driven by purpose rather than price. And each time you act from that place, you feel a bit more whole, a bit more awake. Yes, it is slightly more risky for a system that wants you to sleep. Finally, the man who does not chase money is not destitute. Rather, he is powerful. He does not lack motivation. He has simply chosen a different path. He's not falling behind. He's simply taking a path that most people are reluctant to travel. He lives according to his own compass. He works for a purpose, not just for money. He prioritizes time above titles. Depth matters more than presentation. Because of this, he cannot be bribed by status, bought for comfort, or be hushed by terror. He doesn't need the system's approval. He's found his own. Yes, people will misunderstand him. He'll be considered unambitious, impractical, and even dangerous. In a way, he is dangerous. Dangerous to a civilization built on insecurity. Dangerous to a world that profits on your dissatisfaction. Dangerous to everyone who expects you to remain little, timid, and submissive. But make no mistake, this is not a narrative about rejection. It's a narrative about reclaiming, of reclaiming your soul from a marketplace that attempted to sell it. It's important to remember that freedom was never intended to be acquired via tiredness or debt. It was meant to be lived truthfully, simply, and completely, because the world does not need any more millionaires without peace. There is no need for more influencers pursuing acclaim. It does not require increased production. It requires more presence. What the world needs now, more than ever, is men and women who are complete without consumption, who don't just survive the system, but transcend it. So ask yourself, what part of your life has a price tag, and what part never should have? And more importantly, who could you become if money no longer owned your choices? That is the question that changes everything. In a world where nearly everyone is for sale, the man who isn't becomes the rarest and most necessary kind of human being, free.